Hi everyone, welcome back to Brookdale Farm. Well, I got a really good response from my last video about restoring this little sunshine type C harvester, stripper harvester. So it's going to be a massive project, and well, where do you even start with a project like this? Well, I'll tell you where I start. Everybody's different, but the way I start a really big project like this is with a can of CRC. So I go around and I spray everything that I might want to get off, which is basically every bolt on this machine. Go around with a can of CRC. While you're doing that, start writing a list of the parts that you are missing that you need to find. While you're spraying, it's a really good time because you're looking at it in detail. If you stand back too far and look, it just becomes overwhelming. And where do you start? So get down to the finer detail. Now, I put big things on that I'm looking for, like I would love to find the original front wheel and the tiller steering. I do know where there is one, but I don't think they're going to part with it. So I'm going to have to hunt a bit further, but at least I can possibly get some photos of it so I know what it should look like. I also put on smaller things, so I'm missing the grain box door to go on here. I'm going to need to find one of them. But I put on really small things as well, like I'm missing the bolt on this bearing here. Now this bolt is to centre this bearing and hold it in place. There's one on either side. They're quite distinctive bolts. I can whack any bolt in there, but it will look a little bit funny. So if we come down to the front here, you can see there are big square-headed bolts with a lock nut on. They're all over these machines. There's probably there's probably about 10 of them around the machine. So if I find a wreck, chances are somewhere it's going to have one of the correct bolts on it. And it just helps to have all of those bits written down somewhere, because when you find a wreck and you're there pulling bits off, often you don't have very long to do it, and you sit there scratching your head trying to remember all of the things that were on your list. So there's two parts on this machine that I'm going to take off and start working on first. The grain bin here, I'm not sure where that piece of wood is from, has a lot of holes in it. If we come down here, you can see it needs a complete new bottom on it. And so there's a fair bit of work to do to that. If we come around to the seconds box here, you can see that somebody has already had a good go at cutting this apart and remaking it. So this has already had a new bottom put in it, but once again it's rusted out after those repairs were done. I think this is fusion welded with an oxy set. So this is the way I fixed the fuel tank on the Farmall F14 that I was working on. And you don't see this very often anymore, so it's curious to see that somebody has cut all of this apart and fusion welded it together. If I have time, I may well fusion weld a new piece in, just to keep the repairs sort of as original as possible. Every time you restore something, you take away a bit of its originality. This repair was clearly done during this machine's working life. Somebody's put a lot of time and effort into repairing that. But I'm going to have to cut most of that out and redo it again anyway. So if I can keep some of this, or if I can do the next repair in the same way, that will keep some of its history intact. So we're going to take this off so that we can turn it upside down and get a really good look at the bottom of it and work out what we're going to do. I think we're going to have to replace most of the bottom of this. but that's okay. The other part that we are going to take off is the winnower section. So that's from the back here and the fan right down to the front of the screens in here. There's a lot of timber in here. This is all rotten. There's a lot of sheet metal work underneath, which is I need to find some good photos so I can work out how this should go back together, because actually there's not quite enough of it for me to work out at the moment. But you know, all of this under here is also rotten, so we're going to have to remake a fair portion of the winnower. And those two pieces are fairly big projects in themselves, but if you break it down into pieces like that, it just makes the project a little more possible. I'm probably also going to be looking for some help with this project, because it's quite a big undertaking to rebuild all of this. So firstly, if anybody's got parts, an old wrecked machine, that particularly if it's close to 2J Western Australia, I'd love to hear from you. But also I'll be looking for some people to help with a few parts of the project. So if we come around this side, this main drive wheel here should be lined with timber, and that should be steam bent. It's about 1.5 inches thick. There's two pieces of it, so I'm not even sure where to get timber big enough for this, yet alone how to successfully go about steam bending it. But I'll see if I can find anybody who might want to have a go at that. Whenever I'm working on these old machines, I like to try and get as many of these old square nuts off as I can and keep them. These are all handmade. They're all odd sizes, but and a hexagon nut will work fine, but they do look a bit out of place on this old machinery. It's nice to keep it original. And look, there's a bundle of hexagon nuts on it, but there's an awful lot of square nuts on it too. So as many of these, if you can put them back, that's great. So there's only about 5 bolts that hold the grain tank on. There's 2 under here, one on the side here that connects to a brace over here, and 2 round the back here. Now whenever I'm taking things apart like this, one of the other things I'm looking for is paint. You'd be surprised at how much paint will be on a machine that's even this rusty. So you can see yellow paint over here and under here, and there's yellow paint in behind this nut, which I've scratched up a bit, unfortunately, undoing it. So this starts to give us a good idea that this machine was mostly yellow with a little bit of red on it. There was another very original machine which I almost got my hands on before this one, that had an awful lot of green on it. I suspect that was a slightly earlier machine because it had a little bit more timber in it, but there was a lot of green on that one. Every picture you look at of these, they're different, and every restored one has been done differently. So you just need to look carefully as you're taking it apart, and you can usually work it out. Okay, so we've got the grain bin off, and now we've got it on its side. We can have a look and just see how bad it is. It's not actually as bad as I thought it was going to be. There's a lot of rot around here though. Can't work out, I think that seam there is original. These rivets look a little bit different to some of the other ones that have been used, but obviously we're going to have to remake this section. A lot of the second's been has holes in it. So there's holes here, not much left of the bottom of it, not much left of the front. Now there's two things in assessing this and how much we're going to replace. Probably it would be easier just to make a whole new one of them. Because we're on a bit of a budget, we're going to need to find some steel from somewhere to do that. Galvanized iron's getting far more expensive than it used to be, so we may look at trying to repair it, or seeing if we can find some steel fairly cheap. Now if we just roll it over a bit, you can see this whole side in here has gone. Probably we'll have to end up remaking that little seconds box. Down, this is the front of the bin. I can't let go of it because it'll bend a little baffle up the top. So we've got holes all the way along the front here. I had expected I might need to put a whole new bottom in here, but maybe we can get away without doing that. Maybe we can get away with just putting half a new bottom in it. We'll have a bit of a think about that and see where we go. It's also got a few cracks in it from the work it's done over the years. This one here, let me see if I can get that in frame. This one down here, hang on, I'll put the bin down. So there is a crack along here that's been welded and re-cracked several times. It's just interesting to note all the repairs that it has already had done to it. Next we're going to take the winnower unit off, and this is quite a big piece of the harvester. There'll be a fair bit missing once we get all of this off. Although it's quite a big part of the harvester, because it pivots in just about every direction, it's not that hard, there's not that much holding it on. So this whole thing here can be twisted like this to change the angle of your screens. Your screens are up in here, and so there's a lever up the front that operates on this part here to raise and lower the back of your winnower. So your whole winnower is just pivoted on here, and down in here. This is going to be the slightly more tricky side to get apart, and on these two drop links here. So there's one bolt down the bottom, one bolt up the top, and these on the bottom here have a nice little, let me get the rope out of the way, have a nice little hook on the bottom, so you can take the bolt out, and when you're ready you can lift this and swing them out the way. Now this whole winnower also rocks side to side, so we've got rockers on here, and if we turn everything, there's a crank in here that you can change the adjustment on, and it rocks everything sideways on here. It is, however, very heavy, and you can't lift it out easily. You've got to drop it down and slide it back to get it out. So the easiest thing is to sit something on the axle right in under there, lower it down onto that. I was going to use a couple of star pickets, but I don't think they're going to be quite long enough. So we'll have a bit of a think about that, and then just slide it out down onto the ground behind the machine here. So we're going to start by undoing this crank setup here, which is just 2 bolts on the back here. If I can turn this around, there's a couple of holes up here that you can put it in, and this is one of your settings that changes how much everything shakes on your shaker trays. The other thing we're going to undo is this big nut in here, and hopefully we can get these two braces off as we do that. And we also need to undo this bearing pivot on this side here. So I'm going to undo those three things, and then hopefully we can drop it out of here. So while I was stripping this down, I noticed another arc weld on the back here. So the seconds box here has been, I'm pretty sure this is fusion welded with an oxy set, but some of these other repairs around here could be arc welds. But this one on the back here, that is definitely an arc weld. The interesting thing about that is arc welding in Western Australia didn't take off until the 1930s. So we know this machine was still in use sometime in probably the mid 1930s. We don't know when it finally finished its working life, but we do know that it was at least working to the mid 30s. Okay, well now we've got this out, we can see just how fragile this side of it is. It's pretty much collapsed, so that hole there should be up at that shaft level there. It's been held together with bits of wire over the years, so it's going to be interesting even trying to work out what a pattern should look like for these pieces of wood that we're missing in here. If we come around this side, you can see the screens. Now this screen has got a pretty big bend in it here, and it's got bits of wire and stuff holding it together. There's a little piece of wood running along here. Now I think that is all that gives the screen its strength. So hopefully if we make up new pieces of wood to go all around this screen, and then it sits on this ledge here too, which has almost completely disappeared, hopefully that will mean that the screen will straighten out and still work for us. This one up the top here is still solid, other than where it's not attached to anything. And if we come around in here, this gives us a much better look at the back of the harvester. So we can come down in here, and we can see where the two elevators go. So there's one elevator chain that runs in here, and this is the returns back to the thresher, and then the rest of the grain falls down in there, and there's another elevator in there that goes up to the second screen and up to the grain bin. That piece of wood's still reasonably solid, so is that piece in there. So we may not have to replace them, but it will have to come off because all of that stuff there is rotten, and all of that piece up there is very, very rotten. So yeah, it will all have to come apart. We can also see just how badly damaged this back piece is. I'm hoping that there is a join in here. If there's not, we're probably going to put one in there because that looks solid up there, but it's getting pretty thin down here. So that's going to have to be replaced too. Alright, well I think we might leave this video here as we've got a reasonable amount done on this little harvester. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If there's anybody out there with parts, I'd love to hear from you. Also, I'd be interested in hearing your comments about what particularly you would like to see through this restoration process. This is going to be a pretty long process to get this machine working again, and I'll show you as much as you're interested in seeing. Anyway, thanks very much. and I hope to see you again next time. Bye!